I was the law in a town that didn't deserve mercy. Dust-crazed riders, whiskey-sour drifters, and ranch barons who thought a bullet was as good as a signature. I handled them all with the same cold steadiness. My badge wasn't just tin, it was a promise. A promise that no man, no matter how fast his hand or how rich his land, was above justice. That held true for 15 long years. Right up until the day the wanted poster nailed to my own office door carried a face I knew, a jawline I'd shaved when he was 12, and eyes that looked too much like mine. Folks in town whispered, thought it was some cruel joke. "Sheriff, that can't be your boy." But the range doesn't lie, and neither does a bounty signed by the territorial judge. Elias Red Caraway, armed, dangerous, train robbery outside Laredo, 3 dead. He, my son, the same kid I taught to shoot at tin cans behind the church, was now riding under outlaw colors, cutthroating his way through a country I'd broken my back to keep clean. And worse than that, he wasn't running. He was sending me signs, taunts, like he wanted me to follow. You ever feel the ground split under your boots not because of an earthquake but because the past caught up? That's what it was like. Every choice I'd made, every time I chose the town over supper with him, every time I rode after bandits instead of staying to watch him grow, it all came pounding back like hooves on hardpan. Men in town told me, "Let the Rangers take him. Blood's blood." But I couldn't, because I knew something they didn't. Elias wasn't born bad. If he was riding with killers, it meant someone had twisted him, or he was hunting something bigger than what was written on that poster. So I saddled up alone. No posse, no trackers. Just me, my rifle, and the weight of a father's failure. The trail he left wasn't sloppy. It was deliberate. Card tables with his name carved into them. Bartenders saying, "He told us you'd be by." Like he was pulling me somewhere. Like the son was hunting the father as much as the father was hunting the son. And every mile deeper into the frontier I rode, the land got meaner. Burnt mesas, silent canyons, abandoned mining camps where coyotes howled in daylight. This wasn't just outlaw country. This was a stage he'd set. And listen close, because this is the part folks don't tell when they spin tall tales in saloons. Being sheriff is easy when the criminal is a stranger. You can hang a stranger. You can shoot a stranger off a horse and sleep that same night. But when the man on the other end of your gun is the boy you taught to ride, the one whose mother you buried with shaking hands, that's when the badge turns heavy. That's when you find out whether you wear the law or the law wears you. My name is Sheriff Jonah Caraway, and this is how I rode out to bring my own son to justice. And found out justice ain't always clean, and blood ain't always thicker than a promise. The desert has a way of swallowing names, but it never forgets sins. Before we ride further into this story, take a breath and saddle up, because what you're about to hear isn't about outlaws and sheriffs, not really. It's about blood, justice, and the fine line between the two when the man wearing the badge finds his own reflection staring back from a wanted poster. If you're new here, welcome to the frontier, where dust tells tales, and every sunset hides a secret. Out here, every man's shadow is longer than his story, and even the most righteous lawman carries ghosts under his hat. Before we ride deeper into Sheriff Jonah Caraway's trail, before we hear the whispers of the canyon, the echo of gunfire, and the last words between father and son, make sure you've hit that subscribe button. We tell stories that burn slow but stay long in your chest. Stories where the West isn't golden, it's scarred, bleeding, and beautiful. If you love tales of redemption wrapped in gun smoke and dust storms, drop a like on this video. It helps more folks find their way to the campfire. And I want to know where you're listening from. Which country, which town, which faraway place is hearing the story of the sheriff who hunted his own son? Write it in the comments. Let's see how far these echoes travel. Now, pour yourself a shot of silence, tighten your grip on the reins, and listen close. The sun's setting behind the San Pedro ridges, and Jonah Caraway's horse is leaving tracks that no man should have to follow. Because when blood becomes the law, and the badge starts to tremble, what's left ain't justice, it's judgment. The morning it started, the town of Dry Creek woke slower than usual. A wind came down from the north, dry and mean, carrying dust like powder smoke. I remember because the air had that stillness before a shot, where even the flies don't dare move. The saloon doors creaked, the church bell coughed once, and then everything went quiet again. I stepped out of my office, coffee in hand, thinking about nothing more than the broken telegraph wire that had been cutting off news from Laredo. Then I saw it. A poster tacked to my door, its corners flapping like dying wings. I'd seen hundreds of them before, bandits, rustlers, killers, all printed in the same ink, all worth the same weight in silver. But this one looked back at me. Elias Red Caraway, wanted for armed robbery, train massacre, and the murder of 3 passengers. The drawing was rough, but the eyes were mine. The same flint gray color that used to watch me shave every morning in the mirror. My throat went dry. I didn't call for the deputy, didn't say a word. Just stood there, staring at the face of the boy who used to chase grasshoppers in my yard, now wearing a bounty higher than any outlaw in 4 states. Word spreads fast in small towns, faster than rot in the floorboards. Before the hour was out, folks had gathered near the office. They didn't speak loud. They didn't have to. I could feel their pity like heat on my neck. Old man Hargreaves muttered, "Hell, Sheriff, can't be true." I didn't answer. Truth don't care if you believe it, and when you've worn a badge as long as I have, you learn to recognize the shape of guilt, even when it's carved into someone else's face. Inside, the smell of whiskey and gun oil filled the room. I poured myself a shot, stared at that poster again, and tried to remember where it all went wrong. Elias had been restless since he was 15, too smart for the cattle trade, too proud to take orders, too much like me for his own good. His mother used to say, "You two were born from the same storm." Maybe she was right. Maybe that storm never passed. It just grew legs, rode out, and started robbing trains. The telegraph finally came through that afternoon, crackling like a dying snake. Message from the marshal's office. Elias Caraway confirmed among gang. Last seen near Redwater Gorge. Proceed with caution. Proceed with caution. Like there's a way to hunt your own blood cautiously. I folded the paper, slipped the poster into my coat, and walked to the stables. Every step echoed. The kind of sound you hear in dreams when you're walking towards something you can't undo. Deputy Finch tried to follow. "Sheriff, let the Rangers handle it. Ain't no shame in that." I stopped him with a look, the kind that makes a man step back without knowing why. "He's my responsibility," I said. He opened his mouth again, but the words died there. Maybe he saw what I saw, how this wasn't just law business. This was family business. And in the West, family business ends one of 2 ways, with a burial or a legend. The trail to Redwater was cruel. Sandstorms cut at your eyes and the sky turned copper by noon. I rode hard, stopping only to water the horse and read that poster again. I don't know why I kept looking. Maybe I thought if I stared long enough the paper would change, that the artist got it wrong, that those eyes weren't really his. But every time they were, cold, defiant, older than they had any right to be. Like life had beaten him faster than it ever beat me. I reached an old mining shack by sundown. Smoke still curled from a dying fire. Boot prints. 4 horses, but only 3 rode away. Inside, I found the proof that this wasn't random. On the table, carved into the wood, were 5 words. "Still proud of me, Pa." My hands shook. I wanted to tear that table apart, burn it down to ash. But I didn't, because in that moment I realized this wasn't just a chase. It was a conversation. My son wasn't running from me. He was talking to me through the dirt, through the wind, through blood. I sat there all night, listening to the desert breathe. Coyotes howled somewhere to the east and the stars looked sharper than glass. I thought about all the men I'd buried wearing their crimes like medals. Thought about Elias, how he used to laugh so hard it made the birds scatter. And I wondered if that laugh still existed somewhere inside the man who'd carved those words. I couldn't sleep. Not because of fear, but because of something worse. Doubt. Maybe he didn't turn bad. Maybe I did. When dawn came, I mounted up and rode toward the gorge. The sun rose red, staining the sky like an open wound. Each mile felt heavier, like the land itself wanted me to turn back. But I couldn't. Not now. The law might not bend for blood, but neither does a father's heart. Somewhere out there, Elias was waiting. Maybe for forgiveness, maybe for judgment. Either way, I was coming. And I had a feeling, deep down in the marrow, that by the time this ended, only one caraway would ride home. Redwater Gorge isn't on most maps, and the men who know it don't brag about it. It's the kind of place the land made on a bad day, a split in the earth, red walls slick with old rain and iron, narrow trails where a single horse can pass but two men can't stand side by side. Buzzards circle it like they're on salary. I'd ridden near it once years back chasing 3 cattle thieves. Found 2 of them dead and the third half mad, saying the walls talked at night. I figured he was drunk, but riding in now, hearing the wind scrape across the rock, I knew what he meant. That place didn't want visitors. The trail in was fresh, 4 riders, heavy load, likely spoils from that train job. But I saw something else too. A 5th set of prints, smaller, lighter, that came in later and didn't leave. Elias. He was late to camp or doubled back to leave me something. The boy always knew how to make himself noticed without being seen. I guided my horse into the shade of the gorge and felt the air drop a few degrees. Sunlight couldn't reach the bottom, and the red stone threw echoes everywhere. A man could be 2 turns away and sound like he was whispering at your shoulder. Perfect place for an ambush, perfect place for a message. About a 1/4 mile in, I found their fire pit. Still warm, tin plates, a whiskey bottle with Austin markings, and tied to a low mesquite branch fluttering like a prayer flag was another scrap of paper. Not a wanted poster this time. A page torn from a Bible, the Book of Judges, if I remembered right, with 4 words scrawled across it in rough, familiar handwriting. Who judges the judge? My stomach tightened. Elias knew exactly where to cut. I'd sentenced men for less than he'd done, sent them to the rope without blinking. Now he was asking me, inside this red throat of earth, if I was willing to measure myself by the same rope. I didn't have long to think on it. Hooves, 3 of them, coming from deeper in the gorge. I slipped behind a rock spire, drew my rifle slow. Bandits don't ride quiet. They ride like they own the dirt. These did. They came around the bend laughing. 2 mech saddlemen and 1 blonde kid with a scar on his chin, rifles slung lazy. Not Elias, not the leader. Just pieces of his outfit. I could have cut them down right there. Lord knows I've shot men for less, but I needed answers. So I stepped out from behind the rock, rifle leveled. Hands where I can see him. The youngest went for his gun. I shot the ground an inch from his boot. The echo nearly split the canyon. Next one's higher. The eldest of the 3, dark-eyed and dust-caked, raised his hands slow. Caraway, he said, like he'd been expecting me. El Patron said you'd make it. Your patron got a name, I said. Around here. He smiled with only one side of his mouth. We call him Red, like the poster. Hearing other men call my boy by an outlaw name did something hot and ugly in me. Where is he? Not far, but he don't want you dead. That's so. Said to tell you, follow the canyon, alone. That last word sat between us like a rattler, alone. Just like the first message. Just like the shack. He was pulling me deeper. I disarmed them, tied their reins to a rock, and left them there. I could have taken them back to town, but this wasn't over. And I wasn't done listening. Besides, I knew the type. Trail wolves. They'd scatter once I was out of sight. My business wasn't with them anyway. My business was with the man behind them. I rode on, every step echoing, every turn tighter than the last. The canyon walls started closing in, and up ahead I saw it, a narrow shelf, barely wide enough for 2 boots, leading up the rock face. Tied to the base of it like he was daring me, was a red bandana I knew too well. Elias used to wear it when he was a boy playing Texas Ranger in the yard. Now he was using it to guide me to God knows what. Climbing that shelf, I felt my age. 49 years in the sun, half of them spent in the saddle, and suddenly I was climbing rock like a coyote. But at the top, the view stole the breath right back. A hidden hollow in the rock, maybe 20 yards across, ringed with brush to hide the campfire smoke. Smart spot, couldn't be seen from the main trail. And there, laid out neat as a sermon, were signs of Elias's mind. A map of the Santa Fe rail line, notes on payroll shipments, names of ranchers who paid for protection. This wasn't some dumb kid robbing for whiskey money. This was organized, planned, calculated. My son had built himself a small, mean empire in the shadows of the land I was sworn to protect. But the thing that broke me wasn't the map. It was the box beside it, weathered wooden crate, marked with my initials, JC. I knew that box. I'd kept it in the attic for years. Inside it, when I opened it with shaking fingers, were pieces of a life I'd thought I'd lost. His mother's brooch, the silver spur I promised him when he turned 18, the old family photograph from Abilene with me holding him at 2 years old. He'd taken these from my house years ago, I realized. Not to sell, to carry, to remember, to weaponize. He was telling me, I didn't forget you. I just stopped waiting for you. Took you long enough, Pa. The voice came from behind me, smooth as worn leather but deeper now, a man's voice. I turned slow. Elias stood on the rim of the hollow, hat tilted, coat dusty from the ride, hair longer than I remembered, the red in it darker, sunburned skin, a revolver low on his hip. But the eye, same gray, same storm. He had my stance too, weight on his left leg. He smiled like this was a family supper. You look older. You look wanted, I said. He laughed once, sharp. Well, that's the thing about being good at something. I didn't raise my gun, neither did he. We just stood there, 20 feet apart. Two versions of the same man history had split down the middle. Why the train, Elias? I asked. Why the killings? His jaw tightened. Wasn't supposed to be killings, that was Harlan, hot trigger, I handled it. 3 dead says you didn't. 3 dead says the territory listens more to railroad men than to ranch folk robbed blind. He stepped closer, eyes burning now. You ever wonder why a man turns outlaw, Pa? Sometimes it ain't greed. Sometimes it's because the law's looking the other way every time a rich man steals slow. I just sped it up. You could have come to me, I said. I did, he shot back. Every year you rode out on Christmas, every time you picked the badge over the boy. I learned real young who you really belonged to. The words hit harder than any bullet. I swallowed. I still belong to the law. Then I guess we're on opposite sides now, he said softly. But I ain't ready to kill you, Sheriff, not yet. There's more you need to see. And just like that, he whistled for his horse and backed toward the far ledge, disappearing down a trail I hadn't seen. He was leading me again, not running, not surrendering, guiding, which meant this wasn't the end. This was only the second door in a long, dark hallway. And I, fool that I was, kept walking. By the time I reached the next valley, the sun had turned the land the color of old blood. My horse was sweating foam, and my bones felt like they'd been through 10 winters in one ride. The boy, no, the man, had outpaced me easily, but he hadn't vanished. He was still pulling me along, same as before, leaving crumbs of guilt and memory behind him like a trail through hell. I followed because I had no choice. When a father's heart is tied to a ghost, the rope drags him wherever it pleases. I came to a dry riverbed that looked like God had split the world and forgotten to fix it. Bones of cattle lay half buried in the sand, and vultures hopped lazy circles in the air. That's where I saw the next sign. A silver coin half buried near the bank. I knew it at once. It was one of the silver dollars I'd given Elias when he turned 16, after he helped me haul in a gang near Fort Stockton. You earned it, I'd told him back then. Now he was using it as a breadcrumb, a message again. He was leading me toward something or someone. Night fell sharp and fast. The desert don't fade into darkness, it snaps to black, sudden as a gunshot. I set camp under an outcrop, the kind that breaks the wind but not the silence. I couldn't sleep, so I cleaned my rifle. More to keep my hands busy than to ready for a fight. My mind kept replaying his words. Sometimes a man turns outlaw because the law is looking the other way every time a rich man steals slow. He wasn't wrong. The rail companies, the cattle barons, they built their empires with bribes and blood. I'd arrested men for stealing bread while those same men lost their land to forged deeds. Maybe Elias didn't turn against the law. Maybe he just stopped believing it ever existed. Around midnight, I heard hooves again, slow, cautious. I pulled my gun, thumbed the hammer, waited. A figure rode out of the dark. No lantern, no badge. He stopped 10 paces away, hat low. "You're following the red caraway trail," he said, voice like dry gravel. "You won't like where it ends." "Who are you?" I asked. "Name's Crowder. Used to ride with him. Used to believe him too." "Where is he now?" "Not far, but he ain't alone. There's a man pulling his strings. A rancher out of Tucson named Silas Harlan. The same one whose name was on that telegraph message." "I know Harlan," I said. "He's a land shark." Crowder nodded. "He's more than that. He's the devil with a ledger. He's buying up water rights and killing anyone who says no. Elias found out. Thought he could steal from Harlan to pay the ranchers back. Then the train went bad." Crowder looked at me hard. "Your boy's not the villain, Sheriff, but he's working for one without knowing it." "Then why tell me?" I asked. "Because Harlan sent men to silence him last night. If you don't find him first, you'll be burying 2 caraways before the week's out. I wanted to press him for more, but the desert doesn't let you waste time on questions." I offered him coffee. He shook his head. "Ain't my fight anymore," he said, turning his horse toward the dark. "But I'll tell you this. Redwater ain't where the story ends. It's where it begins." Then he was gone, swallowed by the same silence he rode in on. The next morning, I found the Harlan Trail easy. Men like him leave footprints that don't wash away. Burned ranch fences, dead cattle, families gone missing. His signature was all over the land. I rode into one such ruin by midday. The house was half burned, walls black with soot. Inside, I found a woman and her boy hiding under the floorboards. She told me Harlan's men had come looking for Elias, thinking he'd double-cross them. "They said the sheriff would be next," she whispered. "Said your blood would buy his silence." I gave her my last water flask and told her to run east till she hit Fort Yuma. I didn't tell her that silence was something I'd lost a long time ago. By dusk, I caught sight of Harlan's camp, big, loud, and full of men who thought numbers made them safe. It sat in the basin below an old mesa, fires glowing like eyes in the dark. I watched through my spyglass. No Elias, just wagons of supplies, guards drinking too heavy, and one tall bastard standing by the biggest tent, coat trimmed in gold thread. Silas Harlan, the kind of man who thought God himself took bribes. I could have taken a shot. I could have ended him right there. But killing him wouldn't free Elias. It'd only make me another ghost with a badge. So I waited, patient as a snake in shade. That night, I snuck in quiet. Stole through shadows until I reached the big tent. Inside, Harlan sat by a lantern, counting coins into neat stacks. The sound of silver clinking was softer than a prayer, colder than sin. "You're far from town, Sheriff," he said without looking up. "You should have stayed there." "You've been using my son," I said. He smiled, still counting. "Your son wanted justice. I gave him the tools. Shame he broke them. You sent men to kill him. Of course. You break a tool when it stops working. He was useful until he wasn't. Now he's bait. And look, here you are." He reached for his pistol, but I was faster. The shot cracked the tent wide open, lantern glass shattering. His men came running, bullets slicing through canvas. I dove for cover, firing blind, feeling heat graze my cheek. When it was done, the night was full of smoke and screams. Harlan lay slumped against the chest of coins, blood pooling like tar. I grabbed his ledger from the table. It was heavy with names, towns, bribes, payoffs. Proof. And scrawled across the last page in a different hand, written rough and fast, were the words, "Pa, don't believe what they tell you. Meet me where Ma's buried." I rode out before dawn, the ledger tied to my saddle, Harlan's camp burning behind me. The horizon was pale, just a thin cut of gold over the black. I didn't feel like a lawman anymore. Didn't feel like a father either, just a man carrying ghosts. The trail to my wife's grave was long. North through canyons, past the church we'd built together, past every mistake I ever made. Elias wanted me there for a reason. Maybe to explain. Maybe to say goodbye. But something told me that the man who'd been my son wasn't waiting for forgiveness. He was waiting for truth, and the desert was done keeping secrets. The trail to her grave was older than most men in the county. It wound through dry canyons and dying grass, past bones of cattle and fences long claimed by the wind. Every mile carried a memory I didn't ask for. The tree where I first kissed her. The ridge where we'd buried the dog. The creek where Elias learned to swim before the drought took it. Every place I'd sworn to protect was now ghosted over with silence. That's how the desert mourns. It doesn't wail, it remembers quietly. By noon I saw it. A single willow tree bent against the sun, roots clutching dry earth like it was afraid to let go. Beneath it, a simple wooden cross leaned sideways, the letters MC still faint on the plank. Mary Caraway. My wife. My anchor. I dismounted slow, hat in hand. The land was still, even the wind seemed to wait. Then I saw him, sitting beside the grave like a boy at church, hat off, head bowed. Elias. Didn't think you'd come alone, he said without looking up. You asked me to. Yeah, he said, eyes on the cross. Guess I did. I stood a few yards away, unsure if I should speak or shoot. The tension between us wasn't anger. It was older, heavier, like two stones grinding under the same river. Finally, he stood, dusted his coat, and turned. The sun hit his face full, and for a second, he looked like the boy I remembered, the one who used to chase lizards by the barn, not the man with blood on his hands. You killed Harlan, he said. He gave me no choice. He always said you'd come swinging judgment first. He used you, Elias. And you didn't? His words came sharp, no hesitation. Every story you ever told me ended the same way. Lawman rides in, kills the bad man, and the world's right again. You raised me to believe justice was a bullet. I clenched my jaw. Justice ain't a bullet. It's what you do before you pull the trigger. Then maybe you waited too long to teach me that. He reached into his saddlebag, pulled out Harlan's ledger, the same one I'd taken from the camp. You think this proves him the villain? Maybe, but look closer, those names. Some of them are yours. Deputies you worked with, ranchers you swore by, men who sent you whiskey every Christmas. He tossed the book at my boots. You think you were cleaning up the West, Pa? You were building it for men like Harlan. I opened the ledger. The handwriting was careful, damning. Payments, signatures, mine among them. I remembered now. The donations for the jailhouse, the territory fees for land disputes. I thought they were legal, honest. Harlan had been behind it all, laundering power through the law itself. The badge on my chest suddenly felt like a lie carved into tin. My stomach turned. You think you're clean in this? I asked. No, Elias said softly. But I'm awake. That's more than I can say for you. We stood there in the dead heat, the wind whispering through dry grass, the grave between us like a wall. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Finally, he said, You can ride back now. Say you found me dead. Say justice was done. You know I can't do that. Then what, Pa? You gonna take me in, parade me through town, watch them hang me while you wear that badge like a cross? I swallowed hard. If I don't take you, they'll send men who won't care whose blood they spill. He smiled sadly. Ain't that what you've been all along? I don't remember drawing the gun. Maybe it was instinct, maybe it was fear. But suddenly it was there, heavy in my hand, aimed right at his heart. He didn't flinch, didn't reach for his own, just stared at me, eyes clear as water. You taught me to stand my ground, he said. Guess this is it. My finger trembled. Every memory we'd ever shared flashed by. The boy with the wooden horse, the laughter in the wheat fields, the night Mary died, and he held my hand at the grave. The man standing before me wasn't a stranger. He was the sum of every choice I'd made wrong. Then a shot cracked, but it wasn't mine. A bullet tore through the willow bark beside us. 3 riders came over the ridge, rifles high, bandanas red. Harlan's men, late to the party, but not too late to finish the job. Elias spun, Drew fired twice before I even blinked. 2 men fell. The third took cover. I dropped behind the cross, rifle up. The world went deaf except for the sound of thunder and grit. When the smoke cleared, 3 bodies lay still, and the air smelled like hot iron and sorrow. Elias stood over one of them, breathing hard. Blood ran down his arm. "Told you," he said, coughing. "Never clean." I ran to him, caught him before he fell. The wound was bad, through the ribs, near the lung. I pressed my hand to it, but he pushed it away. "No use," he whispered. "Law or outlaw, it all ends here, don't it?" I wanted to tell him no, that he could still make it, that I could still save him. But I'd been lying too long. The sun dipped low, the sky burning red over Mary's grave, and for the first time in my life, I didn't know which side of the badge I stood on. The desert don't take pity. When Elias fell, the ground didn't tremble. The wind didn't mourn. It just swallowed his blood the way it swallows rain. Quick, silent, like it was always waiting. I sat there, holding him in the shadow of that dying willow, my hands covered in what used to be half my heart. He was still breathing, shallow and slow, every exhale rasping like sandpaper. "You remember what Ma said?" he whispered. "About the sky." I nodded, though my throat was too dry to answer. Said the stars were holes in heaven, so the lost could look back. He smiled weakly. "Guess she's about to see a few more." I tore off my bandana and pressed it against his side. "Don't talk like that. You're gonna make it," I said, though both of us knew better. He chuckled, soft, like wind through dry grass. "Always were a bad liar, Pa." His eyes wandered toward the grave. "She forgave you, you know." I blinked. For what? For choosing the world instead of her. That one cut deep. He wasn't wrong. Every man who wears the badge thinks he's saving something bigger than himself. Truth is, most of us are just running from the mess we made at home. I had to move him. Harlan's last rider had escaped, and men like that don't stay gone. I hoisted Elias onto his horse, lashed him with rope, and started the long trail toward town. Every hoofbeat sounded like judgment. The sky burned gold, then violet, then black, and the air got cold enough to bite. Elias drifted in and out of consciousness, muttering things I couldn't quite catch. Names, maybe dreams. I wanted to tell him everything I'd never said, but words are like bullets. Once you fire them, you can't take them back, and I'd already fired too many. Somewhere near Coyote Pass, he stirred again. "Pa," he said, voice thin as wind. "You ever think maybe justice ain't about right or wrong? Then what's it about?" "Timing." I didn't answer. The trail curved along a cliffside, moonlight washing the rock silver. He coughed, blood glinting in the dark. "If I don't make it, don't bury me in town. Don't let 'em hang my name." "Where then?" "Next to her. That way she can scold me proper." He smiled again, weak but proud. I nodded because it was all I could do. We made it halfway before the rain came. Sudden, heavy, and wrong for the season. The desert smelled like old copper and ash. Lightning split the hills, and the sound rolled over us like 1,000 hooves. I took shelter under a stone ledge, wrapped him in my coat. He was shivering now, eyes half open. "Tell me something good," he murmured. "Something that ain't about death." I thought for a long time, then said, "You remember when you were 9? You caught that rattler by the creek." He grinned faintly. "You screamed louder than Ma." "Damn right I did." He laughed, then coughed, then went still again. The rain fell harder, washing his blood into the dirt. At dawn, the storm broke. I looked out across the flats. The whole desert glowed gold and new, like nothing bad had ever happened there. But evil don't wash away, it just hides better. I turned to Elias, but his chest wasn't rising. Just stillness, still as stone. For a long time I didn't move, didn't breathe. The sun climbed high, and the flies started circling, and I just sat there, holding what was left of the only man I'd ever been proud of and afraid of all at once. By midday, I dug his grave beside hers. The soil was stubborn, full of roots and old rock. Every shovelful felt like a confession. When I was done, I laid him down careful, placed his hat over his chest, and the red bandana in his hands. I didn't mark it with a name, just carved one word into the cross: redeemed. Maybe that was a lie too. Maybe redemption don't belong to men like us. But I had to believe it meant something. That somewhere Mary was smiling and Elias was finally quiet. The ride back to town was longer than it should have been. The world looked different, smaller, hollower. I passed ranchers, prospectors, even a preacher heading west, but no one met my eyes. Maybe they'd heard, maybe they just knew. I reached Dry Creek by sundown. The people came out to stare, waiting for the story. I dismounted slow, handed my badge to Deputy Finch. "The law's yours now," I said. "I'm done being its witness." He looked confused. "What about your son?" "Justice found him," I said. "That'll have to do." That night I packed what little I had left: a Bible, a revolver, and a photograph of the three of us back when the world was still kind. I didn't know where I was headed. Maybe east, maybe nowhere. The badge had been my compass for 20 years, but now it just pointed backward. As I saddled up, I looked once more at the horizon. The desert was quiet again. Maybe it was done with me. Maybe I was done with it. Before I rode out, I stopped by the saloon, ordered 2 shots of rye, poured one on the floor. "For you, boy," I said under my breath. The bartender didn't ask. The piano stopped playing for a moment, then picked up again. Same sad tune it always played when men rode out and didn't come back. I finished the other shot, walked out into the dust and mounted my horse. The wind picked up, carrying whispers through the street. Maybe it was the desert. Maybe it was him. Either way, I tipped my hat and rode west, chasing the last light. Because out here, a man don't ever stop being sheriff. He just runs out of sons to arrest. They say every man leaves 2 graves behind, one for his body and one for his name. I reckon both of mine are out there under that willow, where the desert winds whisper through dry roots, and the stars shine just bright enough for the lost to find their way home. I spent half my life chasing justice, but in the end, I found something colder. Justice is written by men, redemption's written by pain. Some nights when the wind cuts through camp and the fire burns low, I still hear his voice, laughing, arguing, living. I see the boy I raised and the outlaw he became, and I can't tell which one of us was the real sinner. Maybe both, maybe neither. The law didn't make me righteous. It just gave me permission to lie to myself a little longer. If you ever find yourself riding through Dry Creek, look west toward the hills at sundown. You'll see a lone cross and a red bandana fluttering against the wind. That's him, that's us. A father and a son buried on opposite sides of the same promise. And the promise was simple, that love and justice never ride the same horse.